Okay, so I've got about 9 minutes before we get started. Um, I'm here in the Zoom room, so if you're on my email list or you're a member of the Rug Cooking Journey, you can join me via Zoom. Today, we're going to talk about how to create a label for the back of your rug. There's so many different ways to do it. I'll talk about the pros and cons of each kind. The important thing is that you get a label on your rug. So let's just kind of chill pill here while we wait. Oh, I don't have anything set up. Oh no. Okay. So I'm just going to have to do it manually. I'm going to add a countdown timer to 2 o'clock because that's when we'll get started. Oops, I don't want to do that. Okay, so where did my window go? Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. I need a timer overlay for 4 o'clock to a day and a time. Today's the 12th. You. So April 12th, 2024. It's important to get the right year right. At 4 o'clock. That's a horrible color. I don't care. I'm putting it up there. Okay. It's not a horrible color. It's just not a color that matches any of my brand colors. But that's okay. And why isn't it counting down? Okay. So while we've got that there, let's do this. Edit countdown. Countdown for 2024 at 2 p.m. I put 4, but still it's at 00, which I thought it was just because I hadn't saved it yet. Okay, so I'm just killing time. I've got about 6 minutes until we're actually going to go live. Let me check a little bit on YouTube to see if anyone is there, or am I just talking to myself? Because there's nobody in Zoom yet. Turn the volume off on that. Okay, so we've got people watching here on YouTube. Thank you for being here. I was just trusting that I was not talking to myself. This is going to be a lesson about how to add a label using multiple different ways. I'll open up the discussion with the people who will join me in the Zoom session, if there's anybody who's going to join me for the Zoom session. Members see the link on the dashboard. I just sent out an email if you're on my email address and invited you to the Zoom, because that is a better way of asking questions, right? Because it lets you turn on your microphone and actually talk with me instead of in the chat. So in the meantime, what's going to happen is I am going to monitor all the comments that come in. I'm just now opening up that window. Katrinka is here. Okay, Katrina, let's save that for the end, but that's a good one. I did cover that before, I think just recently. So it might have been Tuesday in the office hours. The office hours that I do for members every Tuesday. So if you have, I can't remember if you bought into the Rug Cooking Journey. If you did, you can go see that. You can go see that as, no, the replay's not posted yet. So when the replay's posted, you'll be able to see it. But I'd be happy to go over that again with it. Quiltessa is saying, "Oh, I haven't had good luck with computers." Yeah, it's not so much trouble with the computers, it's staying on top of the updates, because there are several pieces of software that come together that allow me to broadcast to YouTube with my members on Zoom. And they've changed, and you have to sort out what change affects your broadcast and which ones don't. And it's not always the simplest way to figure it out. So, how much time do we have? We have 3 minutes. Katrinka, thank you. Yes. I seem to have gotten out of the migraine fog, which is awesome. I am going to run and get one thing. I've got about 3 minutes before we get started. So hang in there. We start at 4. Okay. So we'll be getting started now. 2 minutes. So right when it starts up at 4 o'clock, which will be a little bit later on YouTube, because on YouTube there's probably a good half a minute, 20-second delay. So I'm saying stuff, you're hearing it on YouTube, but I said that in the past, which is kind of weird. We got 1 more minute. If you have any questions, please, please, please put them into the chat. For the people who are here on Zoom, you can raise your hand. I can call on you that way. But for now, I'm going to be using the chat as sort of my list. I have one topic that Katrinka has recommended, but feel free. We're going to be talking about labels today, but this is a beginner session, so I run it the same way I run office hours, which means if you want to ask something, you can ask me anything. It does not have to match the topic that I'm talking about. So we got a couple more seconds and then we will get started. Okay, I have straight up 2 o'clock. I think I said earlier we'll get started at 4. It's because all my other trainings start at 4 o'clock. This is, I do it in advance on the second Tuesday of the month, and it's a beginner session. This particular lesson is not really for beginners. It's really a more advanced session, but I think it's something that is so important, and that is put a label on your rug. Now, one of the most exciting things to do is to find an antique rug, and you flip it over and it's got a label on it. It tells you who hooked it, who designed it, maybe where the hooker lived, different kinds of information that you feel like it's extra valuable because you know the history. In quilting and in antiques, they call it provenance. They know where it came from. They know who made it, when they made it, all that kind of stuff. Put a label on your rug. So let's talk about the different ways that you can put a label on your rug. So the simplest thing, and the one thing that I recommend you start out with, is going to be plain old boring paper. Okay, you might not have expected me to say that, but I do a lot of my planning for my rugs on paper, and your label is really no different. I don't want you to get caught up in the tech of how to create the label until after you have your label designed and you kind of know what it's going to look at. So I'm going to do this completely unplanned. And let's just say usually I'll buy paper to print on that is something like this. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this brand. You do want it to be 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper so it fits in your printer. These are treated and they usually have a backing on it that allows it to go through your printer. We'll talk about more on that later. The one thing that I want to talk about is how I do the labels. I usually do 2 on 1 page. So if I'm designing the first one, it's going to be roughly this size. And I want sort of a hand-drawn, almost like a cartoon kind of look. Let's put some kind of decoration. Let's just do, this is like doodling in high school, right? Come up with some kind of an idea that maybe will be your trademark, meaning you'll do every label with that kind of design. And then that becomes your starting point every time, which is really kind of nice. The other thing that I do is I always put the year at the top. Then I put the name of the rug. Let's do this. We'll call this demo rug. Now, the reason I do it on paper, because if I wrote this on my fabric, I would be regretting the fact that it's not more centered. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But get it in there. This is your first draft. Just get it in there. Then I'm going to say designed and hooked by me. But I'm not going to put me on there. I'm going to put my name. And maybe I could have moved this one over a little bit further this way, right? So you're kind of getting an idea of what's going on. I like to put the dimensions on it. So let's make something up. Let's call this 15 inches by 20 inches. And then the space down below is for a little sentence or 2 that you would decide to create to go to explain the rug. So I'm going to say this was created for the beginner class. I could write whatever else I wanted about that. Sometimes I tell a story, which is why a lot of the times I will design my rug on something like for the Mac, it would be Pages. It would be Word in Microsoft. It would be Google Sheets for everybody. Google Sheets works for everybody, and that's saved in the cloud. So that's a real good place to be doing that. We'll talk a little bit more on that, but if you've got a lot to write down here, you might consider doing your label in a word processing program like that. So let's just say for now, this is my first draft of my label. What I'll typically do then, and you can do this like standing at a door that has a window, which makes it really easy. You can kind of see it through here. And again, I'm just trying to figure out what information I want to put on the label. Let's do our little daisies in the corner. and 2025. And here's how I recenter it. I look at where it was before, and then I just take the paper that's underneath. This is down and dirty centering, right? And then I'm going to put right here, demo rug. See, that looks much better now than what this one does, right? And I'm just going to continue to do that for all of them. Get the next line a little bit better centered. And then just rewrite it. And hooked. Oh, and I wrote much bigger this time. So this is what usually happens to me, okay? I'll do it the second time and it still doesn't fit. So what I'll do then is I'll work to get all the rest of this kind of centered where it needs to be. And then I might go through and retrace it again for the third time. What's important is you want to get it laid out the way you want it laid out, particularly if this is going to be your tool, okay? It's a Sharpie permanent marker. You want to make sure it's industrial. It's not the regular one. The super permanent ink is takes temperatures better, doesn't run as much. This is what I recommend drawing your patterns onto your backing with, right? So once you've got that, then you can actually take a piece of fabric, and now much slower than what I've been doing, and I would iron this to get rid of this crease. And then I would just trace it on this little piece of muslin, right? And that would take care of that. You would have a label. So let's stop there, because once we get it on the fabric, everything kind of stays the same. So let's look at the second way of doing it. And that would be by using okay, let me go here and here. I had it set up. Did I close it? Okay, so I can't do that. So let me just talk you through it. What you would do is you would use an app like Google Pages. You could use Google Sheets if you wanted to. You would just use text boxes. Sometimes that's easier when you're creating more of like a graphic. And Google Sheets is free and easy. Everybody has a Google Sheets account, whether you know it or not. If you have a sign in to YouTube, you have a Google Sheets access. It's the same sign on. If you have a Gmail account, it's the same sign on. Look, Google Sheets is free. It's available, works on every single computer because it works in your browser. So it's not that hard to progress up a step would be to a word processing program. If you've got maybe you got an old WordPerfect app laying around, I mean, that's from the 80s. If you got a computer that'll run it, you can do it on there. It doesn't really matter what you use. You just want to create the label, print it out on paper so that it looks right, everything's centered, everything's the way you're going to do it. And then you're going to take the treated fabric and you're going to run it through your printer. Now, you only need this treated fabric if you're actually running it through the printer, right? If you are hand drawing it with a Sharpie marker on a piece of muslin, you're not going to need that fabric, right? Because you're just going to get a piece of muslin or some other thin cloth and lay it down over your paper design and trace through it. So the third way to do it would be using, let's see if this one stayed where it belonged. Using your iPad, because I do a lot of designing on the iPad. Okay. Let's get it unlocked. Oh, and I've got low battery. Lovely. So let's go down and take a look at this. This is one that I created really quickly. I don't know why it's not letting me shrink this. But you get the idea. You can draw it on your iPad. You can handwrite part of it, maybe handwrite your name, but then use text for everything else. There's a little T up there, and it doesn't matter what program you use. You can use any program that you could create this kind of thing on. And then once you have that and you've got a printable document, then we're all going to be in the same place. We are going to be ready to take our document, which I have to ask you to use your imagination. If this was on fabric, right, this would be your label. Then I take something thin. You can take the dotless that I sell. I sell this for making your patterns. It's super thin, so you can see through it. Super, super good. We're not actually going to trace on this, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a sewing machine, and you can draw lines on this if it makes it easier. I usually have lines. I'm going to stitch all the way around. Let's see if I can pull this off. You're going to stitch everywhere where I drew the red lines, right? Then what you're going to do is, if this was stitched together, you're going to trim the seams, right? So you're going to make all the seams nice and short. And then if you're used to sewing, you know about trimming the corners. So you're going to trim the corner off. And then what you're going to do to turn it inside out, because I sewed it on all four sides, right? I'm going to grab this red dot, snip it, and then by getting into here, and sometimes I usually have to make it bigger. It's hard to do without it sewn. I had a demo of this piece, and I can't find it. So I'm asking you again to imagine that the paper underneath is actually fabric. I'm asking you to imagine that the red lines are actually stitches. Then what you do is you snip into this thin fabric. If you don't have this, and what actually I think works better is a dryer sheet from your dryer. One that's gone through the dryer, right? And it has no more chemicals, all that smell has gone off. It goes into your dryer really stiff. It comes out a little loosey-goose. You can press it and then use this, and then you turn that inside out, and it creates this label that has the edges perfectly turned back, right at your stitching line, because you've sewn it together. And then I take this to my rug and sew it onto the rug. Now, what I find easiest is to place this on the back of the rug. Well, this one's going to be a little confusing because, it's got a label on it. This one was probably really hard to sew on. But I always recommend that you put it like in a corner, because then at least two of the sides are really easy. Let me get something square because that'll make more sense. Okay. So what you would do is put it in the corner, ignoring the Velcro. Do I have something I can use as a real example? Let's get this one out. Okay. So I usually put mine in the lower corner like this. These edges are curved a little bit. So I'll put it not on the binding, but I'll put it down so that it kind of touches there. And then I'll line it up. I'll pin it on. And then this way I can sew it and hang on to it. This edge and this edge becomes a little bit harder, and you just make do. You do the best you can with that because it does get harder. The outside edges are always going to be the easiest. And then once it's sewn on, then you've got a label that will always be there. Most shows that you take a rug to will require that you have a label on the back. That is mainly so they know that that rug belongs to you. They'll often pin something on the front for the public to see, but then that gets the label on the back allows everybody else to see, you know, who's handling the rug. If they've taken it down from the show, they at least have something that says this rug was hooked in this particular way. Okay, so I know YouTube is running probably 20 to 30 seconds at least before I am. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. It'll take a minute for it to come through, but as soon as it does, then I can answer your question. If you're here on Zoom and you have a question, you can unmute and I would be happy to add you as someone who's asking a question. Get rid of some of this junk. How many of you have trouble putting your label on? Is it because, and what's the problem? Is it just creating it? That's what it is for me. It's getting started, getting created. Once I do that, I am into it and I am good to go. The problem is when I take too long and the rug's been done for a while. Now I have to go back and figure out what's what. Now, one thing we did add to the Notion art catalog, which is where I recommend you keep your progress photos, keep all that information together for each rug. Take a photo of the rug, put that in the Notion art catalog, and then above it, be sure to put a finished photo of the rug, because Notion will always show whatever's on top, right? So your label will be there as part of it. But if you don't have a label, I forget what we called it, but there is a field for each rug that you can put in needs a label. If you've completed it, but you haven't done the label yet, I always try to do multiple labels at once, mainly because on one sheet of paper, I can usually print 2 labels. That way I'm not wasting the fabric, the special fabric that runs through the printer. I have to get something to drink. Holy moly. Okay, so what questions do you have? Okay. This is where we get to play awkward silence. If you have a question, please type it in. If you're on YouTube, you can type it into the YouTube chat. If you're on Zoom, you can type it into the Zoom chat. But better yet, if you're here with me on Zoom, you can simply unmute and, get my attention by doing this. And I'd be happy to add you to the broadcast and answer your question. Yeah, Quiltessa is saying she uses the electric quilt fabric sheets. I don't know what electric is. Is that a brand name? It might be. But yeah, these are all, when you go shopping for the fabric, the quilters have got it all figured out. Definitely get it from a quilt store. You can order it on Amazon. I think my recommendations page at one time had that on there. I don't know if that page is still working. I've had some trouble with the website due to another update that I'm struggling with. Okay, so let me go. There was another question. How do you price rugs you'd like to sell? Ugh, that's tough. Um, Hold on. I'm not getting the question coming up. Preview mode. Back to live mode. Okay. There we go. Okay. So selling a rug can be dicey. You always want to price it for more than you think it's worth. I mean, you can make your own, right? You can figure out how many hours you have into it. You can figure out what your cost is. But even once you have all that, it's like, what will the market bear? There is no magic. This is how you do it. If you are happy to sell your stuff just to get money so that you can make a new one, right? You can keep track of how much wool you used. Be sure to use the current pricing for wool because the wool is going up. So yeah, I mean, people used to say you do it by the square foot. No. Susie Beginner could sell a rug for one price. If I hook the same rug, because I have a name, I have some articles in Rug Cooking Magazine, I have my website, I have a reputation, I could charge more than Susie Beginner, right? But if you have an art background and maybe you already have a name in the art world, you can get that premium pricing too. The sad thing is when I see people sell it for less than what it would have cost them to make it, right? You want to at least recoup your costs so that you can make another rug, right? And keep that cycle going. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll weigh the rug based on the weight. I can calculate that into yardage, use the current yard price for wool. And that's the minimum, right? Because you threw away a bunch of tails. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's not in the rug. But add those costs up the best you can and start there as a minimum. And then it's up to each person to decide what they can gather from the market. It also depends, I think, on how did you hook it and now you're selling it? Or did someone ask you to hook it with their colors, maybe even designed with, you know, their house, their information? That should get a premium, right? Because that's something they can't buy anywhere else. There's not a perfect way to measure it. There just isn't. So Janice is saying, should you include your location where you live on the label along with your name and other information you said? Absolutely. I think there's a lesson inside the rug cooking journey in the beginner basics where I worked through, here's all the information that you need or should consider and put on your label. Quitelsa says, do you use a 50 weight thread or heavier? I use regular ordinary thread. I mean, I'm just sewing this on. You know, my sleeve is not going to fall off. They used ordinary thread, right? So it's the same thing. I don't think you don't need to make this part of the project harder than what it is. Just use regular ordinary thread, get that thing sewn on. I usually match the thread color to the fabric. So, a slight cream if you're using muslin, that kind of thing. That just helps your stitches disappear a little bit more. Did I miss anything? Yeah, Quiltalsa says, I didn't think of labeling a rug. I do my quilts, so it only makes sense. Do it the same way you make a quilt. And Mary is asking, what do you use to sew the label on with? I use ordinary thread. I buy a bunch of that Walmart generic thread that sometimes they have it like in a bucket. Yeah, it's not fancy stuff. It's nothing particular. It just needs to be sewn on, and it's not going to take any stresses. It doesn't need anything fancy. Okay. So we've got all that information. Anybody on Zoom have a question? Okay, I'm not seeing any indication that anybody on Zoom has a question. Let me go back to this question we had earlier. I'm going to switch topics. Katrinka is asking, can you tell me if or how you wash wool? First off, absolutely, positively wash wool if you're getting it from old garments. You absolutely must. The biggest question is going to be when. I am about to disassemble some things I bought in the hopes of using them in rugs. Okay. Rule number 1 for me, my rule, my house, this is what I do. I don't do recycled clothes anymore because the cost benefit is not there. It is not cheaper to buy clothing, rip it up, and then hook your stuff with it, because the fabric that you get is not the same quality. And once you get a taste of the better quality wool, you're not going to want to go back to the recycled. So you're not saving money. So I would caution you on how much you buy. Occasionally you can find a piece that is just amazing and it's the right weight and it's perfect, then you can do it. But what I would do is I would keep those old garments in your car. Don't bring them in the house. Okay? You don't know what's living in those garments, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to take it out by the fire pit if you have one. If you don't have one, you're going to take it out along, the end line of your property so that it's as far away from any dwellings as possible. Then rip it apart. Now, the way I rip, if there's a skirt, let's do this. Let me go to down so that you can see this. So if you have a skirt, which is really the only garment that pays off as far as wool coming out of it, what actually works, you're going to be doing skirts. Jackets are a waste of money and time. Pants can be really difficult, even though they're longer. It seems like you would have more, but you don't always get more. I find that I only get from 5 to 6 ounces out of a skirt. So that's less than half a yard. So you have to be careful what you're paying for that, because the risk that you are bringing into your home is quite large, right? And that risk is cloth moths. They can be bad, bad, bad. So what I usually do is the first thing I do is I take scissors and I completely cut the waistband off. I mean, I just hack right through it. I don't try to take it apart. In those tight little seams, in those tight little places, that's where the cloth moth eggs are going to be. So you don't want that. You don't want that anywhere. So I'll cut that off. If I'm out at the fire pit, guess where that goes? That goes straight into the fire. Boom, gone, right? I also cut off the hem. I know a lot of people will pick out the hem, open it up. If you've ever done that, there is disgusting stuff in some of these hems. And one of those things that you might not even realize could be cloth moth eggs. You do not want those in your house. So now I've got this sort of circle of a skirt with the waistband cut off, the hem cut off. All that's left is good parts. So what I'll do is I'll snip right at the side seam and rip it straight down. Snip here, rip it straight down. I'll go to the other side on the back and do the same thing. So I end up with 2 pieces that are, just the front and the back of the skirt. Now, if it's got a seam in the back, I'll rip on both sides of that seam. I don't want the seams anywhere near my stuff, right? I'll rip that down. So I end up with 2 small places in the front, maybe 1 big piece in the back, or the opposite's true. And then it goes from there straight into the washer. Okay, I'll take all the pieces, everything else gets pitched. Everything else gets thrown away. When I wrote Dying Without Dye, and that is a book that is still out of print, hopefully soon, this summer, I'll go through, re-edit it, and get it back into print. But one of the things I researched for that book was cloth moths, their life cycle, how you treat, what do you do if you've got it? So I asked an exterminator, and I basically said, okay, I have cloth moths. I have a 2,000 square foot house. What do I do? What's it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Do you tent my house? What's that fabric like? Is there something that I need to worry about? And basically, 2 of the exterminators that I talked to, their only recommendation to 100% guarantee that you get rid of them is to move. The problem is these cloth moths, if you're ripping them out in your home, it's up in the air, it's floating around, and it finds a place to settle. They'll often get like behind the molding. They'll get in all the little tiny cracks and crevices, and then they just sit there and they wait for perfect timing. Now, the problem is perfect timing for them is perfect for us too. They like the same temperature that we like. They like the same humidity levels that we like. They do like darkness, which is why I have lights behind my shelves. It also looks better on camera. But it also makes it easier to see the wool too, right? Because without the lights, it's a little bit of a problem. So McGinty is asking, is there a product? No. Prevention. You have to prevent this. Otherwise, you're at risk. You're going to be risking your entire stash. That's why I gave up using recycled clothing. It sounds great, but the problem is it's getting rarer and rarer to find wool. And when you do, it's more of a wool blend. And it's also one that might be worsted, which means worsted is the worst. That's how to remember it. When you put it in the washer, nothing happens. It doesn't shrink. That's why it's good for clothes. It's not good for what we do. We want the wool to fluff up, to get a little bit thicker, to shrink, so that when we cut our strips, those wool fibers are all netted together, which is what happens when you wash them. That's why they shrink. Katrinka is asking, what date did you move your wool sale to? It is generally the last Saturday of the month. Get on my email list and you'll get a notification. Otherwise, go to the live events dashboard on howtorugcook.com. That will show you when the next one is. That's going to be the best place for that. Okay. Don't see any other questions. Any of you on Zoom, do you want to ask a question? Or if you are here with me on YouTube, pop it into the chat and I will see it there. But if that's the last of them, and I'm thinking it might be, then what we're going to do is probably wrap this up. At 4:00 today, another Zoom link, which I've got to fix the website before then. So, trust that it'll be there when you're ready. Go to howtorugcook.com, then go to the live events dashboard, and that'll have the link for the hook-in, which starts in about 90 minutes. It starts at 4:00. It's 2:30 right now. So at 4 o'clock, you can adjust for your time zone. The link will be there, and you will be able to click on that and join me for a more social kind of an event. I don't have a lesson prepared. I don't have my desk covered with examples and ready to draw things out for you. I'm just there to hang out with you guys. So that is at 4 o'clock. That happens every Saturday at 4 p.m. On that live events dashboard is a Google Calendar. You can go to the bottom of that Google Calendar and it'll say add to calendar. You click on that when you are logged into your Gmail account, it will add it to your Google Calendar. Now it'll add it as a separate calendar, which you can turn on or off. But the good news is it adjusts automatically for your time zone. So if you're struggling with the time zone thing, the worst thing that can happen is that you walk into a lesson that you've been really looking forward to and you find out you're an hour late, right? And it's either over or it's half done, and you don't have that information. So I think that's it for now. I am going to go fix the How to Rug Cook website so that it shows up with the correct link for the 4 o'clock Zoom call. And I will see you all over there. So that's it for today. Bye, everybody.